Welcome, everybody. I'm Gigi Rosenberg, and I'm a public speaking coach, and I am so excited to be here today with Gary Simons. I have seen Gary perform not once, but twice at the Newmark Theater in Portland, Oregon, when he opened for Mike Birbiglia. And then the other day, I was listening to Mike's latest podcast, and Gary was on it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the guy, Gary. I've seen him perform. He's hilarious. I want to talk about comedy because I know many of my listeners want to add humor. So, Gary, thank you so much for being here today.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I do want to give you your official introduction.
Okay.
So, Gary Simons is a Connecticut-raised, New York City-based comedian, writer, and actor. He's performed and produced all over the country, and he's been on the road opening for, as we know, Mike Birbiglia, Roy Wood Jr., Gary Gulman, Sam Jay. And in 2024, he was selected as the comic to watch in the New York Comedy Festival. And these days, you can see him perform in New York City, my favorite city, at the world-famous Comedy Cellar. So I'm just so happy to have you here, Gary. I watched a ton of your videos to get ready for interviewing you today, and very, very exciting. So I'm a public speaking coach, and I work with a lot of people who are doing mostly business-type presentations, and they really want to be funnier, add more humor, add more comedy. And as you know, that's not the simplest thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do is start today is just first talking about nerves. Because one thing I notice about myself and others too, when I'm nervous, when I'm anxious, when I'm freaking out, I completely lose my sense of humor. So calming down, I think, is like step number one. So what I wanted to ask you was, when you're getting ready to walk out, and you know, the Newmark Theater, as an example, I think it seats 3,000 or something. So you're standing behind the curtain and you can hear the audience, and you know, it's like 5 minutes to go time. What do you do as a professional comedian to are you nervous? I'm assuming you are, but to just calm the hell down.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely, it's always nerve wracking. It's not like I've done it a bunch of times and now I don't feel it anymore. I always get a little nervous before doing any shows. I think the number one thing that I do, and I learned this from watching a TED Talk in high school about it, but I do a Wonder Woman pose in the mirror where I stare at myself, and I put my hands on my hips and I just look, and I tell myself positive things and try and smile. I'll usually tell myself oh, you're smart, you're funny, it's gonna go well, there's nothing to worry about. And what I learned from that TED Talk, and what I think is true just from my own experience, is that there's a physiological response that happens to your body, and seeing your body by making that pose and seeing that body, where testosterone levels go up and cortisol levels go down, which are cortisol is stress hormones go down, and you're able to it's not it's a perfect thing. It's not you're going to be able to go out there and just lift cars or throw things or something like that. But it's useful, I think, in just helping build that confidence and a bit of adrenaline for what might be a very nerve-wracking experience of going out for X amount of time, talking to people who don't know you and might not be familiar with you. And so that's my number one go-to to calm down and get some confidence before going out.
That's great. So I'm just curious, do the nerves sometimes follow you on stage, or once you get up there, are you okay? And have you ever had an experience up there when you start okay, but then you've get thrown off by something? And what can you do to because you can't do maybe you could do the power pose up there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, after you get on the stage, what happens?
Yeah. So when I get on stage, I usually the stress goes down. I think that the pose helps, and then getting out there, it's kind of okay, we're started, and there's an adrenaline rush that happens. What I didn't realize until recently is that the moments, so I do the power pose, and then let's say when I'm on the road with Mike, I'll be on the wings getting ready to go out, and Mike will be introducing me to come out, and the moment right after he says Gary Simons to the moment to getting to the microphone, I kind of black out. It's a little bit of muscle memory.
Right.
I'm a little bit walk out, smile, just get to the microphone and then I start, and then that's when like my brain locks back in.
Wow.
And then I go into the set, and that's, I mean, it's not like I started speaking gibberish, but one thing that I found that I was doing that I actually didn't like was that I wasn't connecting with the audience or the people there because I was so in my head and stressed out. So usually in that moment, I try to now consciously think like connect. Like I tell myself that over and over as I'm walking out onto the stage in that like kind of blackout phase, just so that I know like the first thing I go into the microphone is not just to recite a speech, but also to like let people know I'm a human being in front of them to talk to them on stage. And I think that's helped just like my approach in general.
So when you're saying to yourself, connect, see, if I said that to myself, I don't know if I would like know what to do. Mm-hmm. So when you say that, does that mean look at the audience? Does that mean, what does it mean that you do when you say connect?
It can be all of the above. I think specifically for me, something I was noticing is that with stand-up, I think in particular, you can have jokes prepared and you go and you like recite your set and say it. But I think what people connect to in comedy is something that feels like very real. And I think that's also like what makes Mike's humor so like relatable and you can connect to, is that it seems like he's just there talking to you. And like maybe he has jokes prepared, but you might not even recognize like that he's setting up something and going for a punchline. And I think sometimes when I was going out on stage, I was very much so like reciting what I was saying as opposed to sounding like it's just coming out of me and I'm talking to you where you're at. So
right.
It can be as simple as like, you know, some people when they come out, they feel like they need to be big, like something beyond themselves. Like I need to perform like I'm like doing a big task. And sometimes it's a little bit more like just be more of your normal version of yourself, like how we're talking right now.
Right.
And people don't feel like, oh, he's putting on an effect or doing something that's not genuine. It's like, oh no, it's like, hey, how's it go? Like first thing I say to him, like, hey, or like maybe it is making eye contact with people in the crowd and like waving or saying hello, as opposed to like walking out and screaming like, what's up? It's like, that's not me.
Yeah. So just like be your normal self, like have a conversation might be what you would do. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Be yourself, look at the audience. And like, if something happens in the crowd where like, sometimes people shout out like, hey, Gary, because they like heard me on the podcast, it's like, say, hey back. Like, you don't have to be like a robot necessarily.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that specifically, because that was something I wanted to ask you about, later on, but let's talk about it now. Because do you know Seth Barish, by the way, from the Barrow Group? Yeah. So when I was working with Seth, and I've worked with him a few times on a solo show that I did, that was something I actually had a lot of trouble doing when I was up there. He said, listen to the audience. If somebody laughs, look at them. If somebody makes a sound, look at them, respond to them. And when I was up there, I found, I thought, God, that's just so hard for me to do. And Seth is like, that's the easiest thing to do. Like a 5-year-old could do that. We're like, okay. But I found for me, when I was, nervous, I'd be like, audience, just let me get to the end of this story because I can't really deal with you right now. I just need to focus on my story.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard. And I've, in all the clips that I've watched of you, I've definitely seen you. Like, I remember when you were telling the story about being the swim captain.
Yeah.
And somebody started to clap, but then they stopped because no one else was clapping. And you're like, no, that's okay. You can clap.
Yeah.
So were you able to do that in the beginning, or did you find that you needed to be relaxed enough to be able to pay attention to what the audience was doing? Or was that just something that I found it hard to do, but is that something that you could just do from the beginning?
No, I don't think that was something I could do from the beginning. It was definitely a lot of repetition. I think it's the amount of times doing stand-up, like I keep track of every single performance that I do. And so like, I think right now I'm around like 160 performances this year. I think last year I hit a little bit over like 365, and I write notes after each one. And it's something that's like, after doing it as much as possible, like you start to get into a certain comfort with just like being on stage and having either no material or some material, just through repetition, honestly. And then two, I think on trying to like focus on that word connect, it is like, when listening to the audience and something happens, it's a bit of taking the risk of like, I'm going to break away from what I'm going to do. And I might not be able to get back on the train.
Right.
But if I
Right.
view it as like, I'm connecting with them, those people will see me more as a person, and it actually might help the set. Like, they won't view me as some, like, he's just reciting a material. You can say whatever you want. He's not focusing. He doesn't care that he's here. We don't even need to laugh and don't talk.
What Seth would tell me is that it really makes a huge difference when the audience feels like you see them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So how I like work with my clients on that is sometimes, somebody will come up and say, how many people notice blah, blah, blah. And I basically ask for a raise of hands.
Yeah.
And I'll say to my client, now look at how many people are raising their hands so you can say, oh, I can't believe that's only half of you, or whatever. Like, you have to, if you ask the audience, especially when you ask the audience to do something, you have to see that they did it and then acknowledge it. Otherwise, they're just like, they're not paying attention to me anyway. And I think the audience starts to get less responsive. You know what I mean? So when you're hearing things and seeing things and commenting on them and relaxed enough to do that, then they feel, oh, he sees us,
The same reason why people love crowd work, like crowd work clips also go up, because it's like, oh, this person is seeing me and responding to me and finding something funny about the situation we're in currently that like only could exist in the present moment. Like, it's not something they could have planned for.
Right. But crowd work is that, talk about, so for people that don't know what crowd work is, it's basically, another way to say it is audience participation, right?
Yeah.
So do you like it, not like it? Because it's scary. Somebody could be a total jerk. Somebody, it could, go off the rails in some way. So how do you deal with crowd work?
Yeah, I'm not a crowd work comedian in the sense that, and crowd work comedian is a term people use for like comedians who like primarily just talk to the audience as the like entertainment for the show, or only really put that kind of content out online. I'm primarily like material based, and I in like live performances will try and like maybe involve the audience on like smaller shows or that type of thing. I don't mind crowd work at all. I think it's a tool in the repertoire of things that you can do. And I like it. Sometimes it's fun to talk to an audience member. I think it can be hard. It's stressful. It's that risk of the same thing we were talking about before, where like, are you like paying attention to someone laughing and then calling out their laugh? Like, you might get derailed on what you were previously talking about to now explore this new domain. But I find it kind of fun. It requires a lot of improv skills, which is a good muscle to use in your brain.
All right. So I want to get back to uncomfortable moments on the stage for a sec. So when you have a joke that doesn't land, I don't know if that's ever happened to you.
Yes. 100%,
What do you do? What do you do up there? Because I could imagine emotionally, it can feel like kind of a letdown. You don't want to be, drag the rest of the audience down with you.
Mm-hmm.
But how can you? I've seen different comedians save that in different ways, and I'm just wondering from your experience, what do you do when a joke doesn't land, and how awful is that for you?
Yeah, I do one of two things, which I think is not unique to me, but I think and other people do it. I usually, if a joke doesn't land and it's like a small joke, like a one-off joke, I'll usually just move on to the next thing and try and like keep going. And alternatively, if it really just doesn't work and it's like, it feels like the room went down to like complete silence, like you can hear crickets or like people eating food during it, I might call out, like, okay, y'all didn't like that one. Like being back into the room of like, okay, we all were there for me talking right now and nothing, no response. I heard it, you heard it. Let's just call it out. I don't do that second option too often, because that can sometimes derail the show too, where people start focusing on like, okay, how does this joke compare to that joke, or this joke compare to that? Like, it gets them too much into the head of like taking away the magic of like, we're all just saying joke, like we're all just having fun right now. And then how does it feel? I think again, the reps help you get over some of the like initial, like first time you say a joke and it doesn't work kind of pain, but it doesn't feel great. It feels very vulnerable. It feels like you were like, here's my heart, or here's something like I really care about and I think about a lot. And then everyone else said please don't ever do that again. Please don't. We prefer silence right now. We
Right.
don't know how to respond.
So, how have you ever had to deal with hecklers? I've seen you deal with a couple of hecklers on the videos that I watch, but has that ever thrown you off? People yelling out things at different times?
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly videos of heckling where I don't put those out online because they don't go well. But it can throw you off. I find that usually the best thing you can do is just like acknowledge that person, talk to them, and then call out what the experience of everyone else in the room is having right then and there. So,
can you give me like an example of that?
Yeah. For example, I think this one's on my Instagram, but I say like I have a joke about like quitting my job and insurance to follow my dreams. And then the joke is like, and now I don't have insurance. And then, and I think there's a video out of me doing that at a club, and then like I keep going into a bit, and then a guy interrupts me to say like, wait, what was your dream or whatever? And then I was like, are you being like, I was like, wait, are you being funny? And no, it was to do this, like to do stand-up comedy. And then, which is like, that kind of heckling isn't malicious. It's like, he's just asking, but he's interrupting the flow of the show. He's kind of messing up this thing. And then I kind of go into a joke being like, oh, clearly I shouldn't be doing this because this guy doesn't even think this is my dream. Like he thinks I should be doing something else. Like this couldn't possibly be the dream because of how it's going. And that's how everyone else is also viewing it. They're a little bit like, oh, that guy's confused. Does he think you shouldn't be doing this? And then I call out that like, oh, that's what everyone's thinking right now. Yeah.
So I can imagine that definitely having a background and experience in improv really helps with those kind of heckling situations, right?
Yeah. And repetition, just doing it a bunch. It's like there were plenty of times where someone's heckled me and I didn't know what to say. And then someone does a similar type of heckle. And then I'm like, oh, now I know what I could say because I've gone through this before.
Yeah. So I find that a lot of my clients want to be funnier, but they don't really know how to like find the humor, find the stories in their own life. So I'm just wondering, how do you find the funny stories? Like, how do you mind? Because so much of your comedy is talking about, I mean, I'm sure you exaggerate and expand on, et cetera.
Yeah.
But how do you know, like, when something happens, if it even has comedic potential? Like, I'm just curious if you could show us like how you see, when you go through your day, like how do you know if it might be funny?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's not every time that I think something's going to be funny and then I take it to stage and then people laugh. It doesn't always go 100%. So it's again, like a lot of like trial and error of like, okay, I have a bunch of things I thought were funny. And then like, of like 10 things that happened today, 6 of those things people found funny, 5 of those things people found funny. Some days it's just one thing they found funny when I take it to like an open mic or a show. A specific example that happened recently that's been working, or 2 things that happened, is a few weeks ago, I was calling my pharmacy to like leave a voicemail. And because nowadays, like you can't just like talk to a person, you have to leave a voicemail. And so I was leaving this voicemail to my pharmacy. And as I was leaving the voicemail, like a bird hit the window, like super hard, like banged into the window. And it was like, it shocked me, but it also was like one of those things that happened so suddenly, like you kind of don't know how to respond other than to laugh. Like there's so much tension built up. You just start laughing and you're like, oh, what did just happen? Like it was crazy. And the bird just like kind of dropped. And in that moment, I didn't think anything was funny. I was like, this is a serious moment, but I like realized that I was still leaving a voicemail when this bird had hit the window. So I was like on the phone being like, hey, my name's Gary Simon. Bow! And I was like, sorry. Gary Simon's date of birth. Like what? Like I'm still leaving a voicemail. And then it was like, it's like after that, like after like a couple hours after that whole, like, which was its own saga, a few hours after that, I was thinking like, that's kind of funny that I had to, like, as this crazy thing happened, I was having to leave there's a recording of how this whole situation went down that someone has to legally is obligated to listen to figure out that everything's okay. And it's like, that's like a very clear one, or just like weird things that happen in your day. I think it's really just like calling out things that you found to be weird during your day, things you found to be sometimes like uncomfortable during your day, because we all get uncomfortable. We all find things weird in our everyday life. It's I think it's a lot about just like being attuned to like what are you feeling at a certain moment, and like is that relatable? Does everyone feel anxious, or does everyone feel embarrassed at a moment like this? Does everyone like have a moment where like kind of an emergency happens, like a bird hits your window, and like, and now just imagine that emergency where you're leaving a voicemail too.
So that's like one scene or whatever.
Mhm.
So if you want to take that scene and like make it into a story or a,
Mhm.
you know, that has a lot of laughs in it, how might you take that, the bird hitting the window while you're leaving a voicemail, and like expand it so that it can be like a bit? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So have you done that with this story?
Yeah, so I've taken this story to stage a little bit since it's happened, and usually what I do is I like like I'll usually figure out like what are the beats of that story, like what's the beginning, middle, and end. Something like a piece of advice that like Mike Birbiglia has given me is just like, like always have an out, like always have an end to your story, always have like a conclusion, because that's what people are waiting for. Is like when does the story end? When's it finish? And if they know that there's a finish, they can trust you to go along to hear the rest of the story. Like they want conclusion. So in that story, like the big of it is like, I'm leaving a voicemail, a bird hits the window. I then go through a saga of trying to figure out what to do, because I see the bird is like unconscious and needs help. Like figure out what do you do when the bird, like when this happens, and then try to save the bird. And then the bird heals, like basically like heals itself, like it basically like gets up a few minutes later and flies off, and which shocks me because it looked like it was down for the count. And then ends with like I get a call back from my pharmacy, and they're like, are you okay? Because I've been leaving a voicemail all the time. And so that's like those are the beats of the story, and you're like, okay,
Right.
I know this is like the beginning, middle, and end. This is kind of how I want it to flow. And then you just take every moment of something happening and try and explore like what makes that funny. How is that funny to you? So like I know that beat one is kind of like the I'm still leaving a voicemail, and that's kind of funny. And then beat two is like I see the bird and the bird is scared, and that scares me a little bit, and I scream a little bit when I see the bird is unconscious, and I'm still leaving a voicemail. So that's kind of like beat two. So like they hear me scream on the phone, and I hang up, and then beat three was like I looked up like what do you do when a bird hits your window, and I saw that the first thing they want you to do is like adopt this bird. Like they want you to basically like take it in and care for it. And like I was like, like I don't even my insurance not set up like that. Like I can't be a parent, like I can't take this bird in. And like that was a joke that came from that. And it's just like, and that joke came from just like exploring like why is this stressful? Why can't I do this? Like what's the truth here? And that's kind of funny. And just exploring very specific, like asking yourself, like, what did you feel? What did you think? What are other moments that make you feel like this? What does this compare to that? Just like strong, like questions over and over again.
So when you're walking around, on your day, so it sounds like you're just making notes of weird things that have happened, uncomfortable things that have happened,
Mm-hmm.
moments when you were scared. And are you keeping like, do you have a notebook and you make a list of like all these things that you can work like kind of mold and work on later?
Yeah, I have a notebook. I also use my notes app on my phone. I usually put in my notes app for quick things when I'm out, and then I usually go into my notebook and write out the bits longer, and then I usually transfer that over to like computer, like either a Google Doc or another part of the notes app with a longer written out version of the joke.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, that story starts so well because everyone hates leaving those long voicemails
Mhm.
anyway. You
Yeah,
just want to talk to a person,
yeah,
And then you do have some jokes where you are Googling WikiHow on different things.
yeah,
So
yeah,
in a way, that's kind of a running gag in your
yeah, yeah,
humor. Like you're going to Google WikiHow. What do you do when a bird hits your window?
yeah, yeah.
So, but the only real true thing that happened was the bird hitting the window while you were on the phone, right? And
Uh,
then all the other things you kind of added to it. Is that true?
For the most part, the story as it currently is pretty true through and through. Like
Oh,
I like the bird hit the window. I was leaving the voicemail. I saw the bird. I like screamed, like I like yeah. I was like, oh, like it like shocked me when and I was still leaving the voicemail. I hung up. I then like Googled what to do. It did say like take in the bird, try and help it, nurture it, whatever, let it out. Then it said, and then I kept looking it up, and then it was like, okay, you can also try and take it to a rescue facility. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take it to a rescue facility. And I started putting holes into the box. And then as I was doing that, I was starting to feel good about myself because I was like, I'm about to save a bird. Like that's such a cool, like I was like, I'm about to do that's going to be like a story I could tell at parties. Like, it was like, you know what I did today? I saved a bird. Like, what did you do? And like, I was like hype about it. And then by the time I got the box ready and I was going to get the bird was up and awake and then flew off like fine. And I was like, wow, that's wild. And I started feeling like annoyed, being like, I just went through all this stress, like this internal term. I almost adopted this bird. And then like it flew off, and then my pharmacy did call me back. And I guess the other untrue thing is they didn't say, "Are you okay?"
Right.
But I was like, okay, that's a funny way to ask.
Yeah. That's totally great. So it sounds like each thing you just really got into and expanded it and really to get all the material. But it's almost like the process is to expand it all, and then you're almost going to titrate it to make it almost like a poem in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the details, but some of the plot taken out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, what I want to ask you about now is I have these different guidelines for humor that I share with my clients. So given that you're a professional, I want to run these guidelines by you to see if you agree. Awesome. The first one we've kind of talked about already, which is sometimes when I'm rehearsing a speech or whatever with a client, they'll say something and I'll be like, oh my God, that is so funny. Like you got to keep that in. Mm-hmm. But then when they're getting ready to deliver it, I say, when you deliver this line, just deliver it straight and do not expect the audience to laugh. Mm-hmm. Because I said, and it's not like you're even really doing anything, but if your expectation is the audience is going to laugh, I can guarantee you they will not laugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do you agree with that? Is that what you find? If you if you in rehearsal, you could hear the laugh, like you better get that out of your head when you deliver it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree with that, even from personal experience. And like, I know it's like that, even that idea is something that I've heard like Mike and John Mulaney talk about, where it's like, if you can imagine the audience laughing in your head, like it's probably not going to get a laugh in real life.
Right. It's not going to be funny.
Yeah. It's not going to be funny. Yeah. And I think it stems from like the audience is like, especially in like a comedy show, like the audience is kind of expecting you to make them laugh. So when you're just kind of when you're like, it's a little bit of a challenge. Like you've essentially gone out saying like, I'm the guy who could make you laugh. And then they're supposed to sit there. And the best audience member is open to anything. But everyone comes in being like, I wonder if you're going to be able to make me laugh. So like, don't tell them you're going to do a magic trick. Just do the magic trick. And then they're not looking for they're not looking ahead. They're not trying to beat you to it.
Yeah.
Looking to be more impressed,
Right. So this is kind of a related question, but so one thing I noticed about you and many other comedians is that the funniest humor is where it's you stay in character, like you're not laughing at the joke while you're giving the joke. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're just delivering it very, very straight. I've definitely seen that, but I've also seen you and other comedians, like maybe then between jokes, you might just go, like just kind of laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
But, and when you watch like early Seinfeld episodes, Jerry Seinfeld is often laughing at like how funny the situation is, but not as his character on the show. You can tell he's laughing as Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So do you try when you're delivering it, like not to laugh, just to be very straight with like, how do you deal with laughing at your own jokes, especially when you know something is like super funny?
Yeah, it's something I haven't unpacked too much for myself, like why I do or don't laugh at certain moments. Sometimes I laugh when I'm like improvising something off the cuff, like, and it's like, I wasn't planning on saying that. It just came off and it's working. And so sometimes I'm laughing at the like kind of wonderment of like, I just came up with that on the spot. Like, that's kind of funny. And like, we're all enjoying it. During the jokes, it's a mix of like, I've said the jokes a bunch of times. So it's not that the joke isn't funny to me, but I can live in the experience of the joke a bit more because I know like how it's supposed to move and what's going to go. I laugh after sometimes I say the joke because I get why it's funny. I honestly can't think of exactly why or how to not laugh during a joke. I think it comes a little bit from repetition. And I think it also comes from my own perspective of like, I do think what I'm saying is funny, but I almost like, I have the insecurity of like, it might not be funny. Like you might not laugh. So
But
like,
you're very, very funny thing about being an overthinker, right?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, I know you've done that several times, but you're totally in character as the serious overthinker in that moment. You're not
yeah,
like
yeah.
laughing at how funny it is. So that's an example where, it's
Mhm.
way funnier when you're like really into it about how much, like you're overthinking, like you're being an
Yeah,
overthinker as you're talking about overthinking. And that
yeah.
makes the joke even funnier.
With that example of that joke, and I think that this can extend to the other jokes too, is a lot of times like that line is funny, but I'm not saying it because I think it's funny. Like I'm saying it because that feels very true to me. Like I'm telling the
Right.
truth in that moment. So like I wrote that. I remember writing that on the road with Mike because I used to have that story about WikiHow, like looking up like how to make a move on a friend, and he was like, I think you need to like unpack why you do that. Like why would you do that? Like I don't think that that's necessarily relatable. And then I had like was sitting journaling about it, and I realized like, I'm an overthinker. And you know what? People tell me I'm an overthinker, and that's so annoying because you should stop telling me I'm I'm overthinking, because I know I'm overthinking. You think this is the first time I've heard this before? Like it's insulting to think that you would think that I haven't thought that I'm overthinking it. Like, and then, like, we don't need your underthinking thoughts. And then like, and it comes out of me in like a very real, like, I'm not like, it's a little bit like it's funny, but I'm not saying it because
Right.
I'm trying to just say something funny. I'm telling you the truth. And I think that's also a little bit of why a lot of comedians don't laugh, is because they're also just saying something that they just think, like they might have just
Right.
said that.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Which leads me to my next thing, which is honesty is usually hilarious.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that saying of it's funny because it's true. And it's
Mhm.
often the things that everyone knows is true, but for whatever reason, nobody ever admits it.
Yeah.
Those are the funniest things.
100%. There's a
Yeah.
book. It's a book about improv by this one of like the originators of improv comedy, at least in the like Chicago style, by this guy Del Close, and it's called The Truth in Comedy. And it's a lot about like in improv scenes, which are made up, is about finding like what's true and not like being super farcical, like playing to the height of your intelligence, and a lot of scenes about like why it's like it's better to yes and not go no and stuff. So like, yeah, there's the truth is usually, the honesty is usually very funny. So I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. The other day, I was teaching a workshop at this corporation, and I was up there, teaching, and the CEO of the corporation stopped me and said, "Oh, I have a story I want to tell. Would that be okay?" And I go, "Yeah." And then I said, "What am I going to say? No?"
Yeah. Yeah.
because what happened to me was he asked me, and then I thought to myself, well, yes, you can, like, and then I just decided to say out loud what I was thinking, which is, what am I
Mhm.
going to say? No. And it was really funny,
Yeah.
but it was funny because everyone in the room, like, he's their boss. He's the
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think you need to trust in the moment, sometimes just to say the thing you're thinking.
Mhm.
And, but it's like you said, it's stage time and having enough time up there to
Mhm.
gauge, do I say this, or like, is this going to be funny or not? I don't know, but I'm going to try it.
Well, and that's for me. There's some people I know who speak their mind all the time, and so it's very easy for them when they grab a microphone to just say a thought, regardless of the amount of time on stage. But I think stage time is helpful for those who who are usually keeping back maybe their first initial thoughts.
Right. Absolutely. Let me look at my list here. So hyperbole, like grossly under or over exaggerating, can be funny.
Mhm.
You do something hilarious, which some other comedians do also, is when you have characters in your stories that we don't know their name because they're strangers.
Yeah.
You give them funny names. Like in the Gary David story, there's that one character whose name is not Gary, not David, and that is so funny. So that's like something, because in our experience of being out in the world, we're like, oh yeah, that's red hat, because that guy
Mhm.
always wears a red hat, or that's neighbor in shorts that are too short.
Yeah.
So it can be just a really funny thing to name people, because that's how we identify them when we don't
Yeah.
know their name. you
Yeah.
know.
And I think that came from like the experience of, I had told that story a few times. And then my friend was like, there's too many characters like to keep track of in your mind. And so it helped to be like, okay, how can I make this person easily rememberable without like saying too many names? And it was like, okay, just know that he's neither of us. Like that's essentially this guy who's neither of
Yes.
us.
But also, given the whole story, makes that story even funnier because that story is about, who's in and who's definitely out. You know what
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? So that was just great. I find also that dashed expectations can be a great setup for humor. And in a way, that was in your bird story. Like you had all these expectations about what a great guy you were going to be saving
Yeah,
this bird. And then the friggin' bird flies away. And so
yeah.
you don't get to do what you want to do, which is such a human experience.
Hmm.
So, one thing I do hear every once in a while that I try to dissuade clients from doing is if they're really pissed about something,
Hmm.
definitely do not bring comedy into it, because if there's any anger or hostility or whatever underneath it, that like never ever lands well. What are
Hmm.
your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I would probably lean on the side of like, if you're mad about something and you're not a professional comedian, maybe don't go and take it to like stage and say jokes about it because it might not come out right. I'm not even saying I'm the right I could, if I was really angry about something, like something just happened, that I could go on stage and like talk about it in a way that would be initially funny. So I think I think the fundamental, like the core of it is right. I do think you can talk about things that do bother you or do frustrate you, but I do think you need time to process it. Like, I don't think you should
Yeah,
immediately be like, take this thing and talk about it after it just happened. Like, maybe give it a
right.
week or two to think on it. Yeah, I have this story about like my aunt. I think I've done it in certain shows. I have this story about like telling my aunt about my girlfriend who happens to be white, and like it's a complicated relationship, but she doesn't like white people. It's a whole thing. And I had to tell her about my girlfriend, and she got upset with me, and she like hung up on me, and she like called my mom, and like that really bothered me at the moment. I was mad. We didn't talk for like a month. I tried to take it on stage and no one was talking, like no one would laugh. And then it uh, about 2 months after it had happened, like the whole like kind of argument and thing, I told the story again, and I like paused and I thought about it, where I said like, like she got upset with me, she cursed me out, then she hung up with me, and then she called my mom. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, like she got upset and then she went to my manager. Like that's pretty white, right? Like that's like, and it helped me like the time away helped me actually find a funny angle on something that was bothering me initially.
Yeah, that's great. And you told that story in Portland.
Oh yeah,
It's a great story. Yeah, so
yeah.
I saw that. That's really great. Well, Charlie Chaplin has a quote. Well, that's attributed to him. Who knows if he really said it or not?
Hmm.
Life is a tragedy when seen in close up, but a comedy in long shot.
Hmm. Yeah.
So tell me what your thoughts are about that. I feel like what the long shot does is it gives you perspective, which is exactly what you got on that joke about your aunt, which could
Hmm.
make it funny. But
Yeah.
any thoughts about that idea of changing perspective, the close up versus the long shot?
Yeah, I think I agree with that quote completely. I mean, a lot of my jokes are in the set that I currently have are me taking is looking like like a bird's eye view of like certain situations that at the time I didn't think were funny. I mean, I think the sets that you've seen and that like I end up posting are things that are happened like in my childhood or like in life that like at the time I was very bothered by, and now I can see the humor in it and laugh about. Um, yeah, and I think that's what a lot of like almost all comedians do in some ways is like take a I take a step back and show you what this looks like from a third person's perspective.
So I want to ask you something now that's just extremely practical, which is how do you memorize a whole set? Because that seems like almost impossible to me. But how do you how do you keep track when you're up there of what you've done, what you're going to do, et cetera? So what's that memorization process like?
Yeah, I think I've gotten better at it. I keep going back to repetition, but I've gotten better at it through repetition. But when I first started in college doing stand up, I would write out exactly what I wanted to say, like long form. Like I would be in classes not paying attention to what the teacher was saying. Like I'd have a like an iPad and like one of those Apple pencils, and I'd be like have the like class notes on one half of the screen, and the other half was like an open thing of me being like, okay, I'm going to start with like I'm from Connecticut and blah blah blah, and like keep going and write out the whole entire set, and then I would like try to get a friend to listen to me talk and just from memory say what I could remember, then refer back to the notes and say it, and then I would just do that on repeat. And then once that friend's time and bandwidth ran out and they got tired of hearing me talk about the same things over and over, I would put headphones on and I would get really close to a wall and I would say my set I would play music through the set, which sounds ridiculous, but it was really to get myself to be able to know what I was saying through all distractions. So I was like, I can talk when there's loud noises and things that, and a song I even like, I can say these words out loud. I can also do it like up into a wall where there's no laugh, there's no response. It's weird. Like if I couldn't see the audience, like I can say this set like blinding lights or not. And that process, I think, helped me initially learn and memorize my sets. And now I've shifted a little bit in that I'm a little bit faster at remembering what I write down. So I don't need to do as many rehearsals of it because through practice. And also I've leaned a lot into remember the ideas of what you want to say and not necessarily the words. I think Seth Parrish via Seth Parrish via Mike talking to me said, like focus on the what, not the how. So say what the point is, but don't focus on like how you need to say it,
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I was just thinking, a lot of clients I have will write out verbatim what they're going to say. Mm-hmm. And then the trouble is they'll then try to follow it. And you can kind of not sound conversational then. You can sound like you're reciting something. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'll say, if you need to write it out, that's fine. But then make like a bulleted list of the thing. And then if you say it enough, you can just have probably like the bird pharmacy story. Mm-hmm. And then you know that story and you can just tell it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it does take a lot. I mean, obviously it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Over and over. And I think it's really, after you do it once, I think it gets easier to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first thing, it's like, okay, next time you have to write something, you remember it a bit better.
Yeah.
Experience that process.
Well, in one of your videos that I saw, you're a character who I guess your dream is to be a stand-up comedian. And mm-hmm. So you're out in the woods and you've got like a row of little plastic toys as your audience. And you're using a pencil as your microphone.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I love this, because I'm always encouraging clients to, I got to show you one of the props I use. I'll bring some stuffed animals into the rehearsal and I'll put them around the room just so they can practice looking at the little black eyes. Yeah. And then I'll bring this guy in and I'll say, okay, this is like your worst enemy who's just walked in, or like the CEO who you hate. So you got to keep yourself together like during this thing. So here he is.
Yeah. Wow.
But when I saw you rehearsing in front of all those, little toys. Mm-hmm. I thought that's what it takes to just get that time, even if you can't find a room full of friends to sit there for all that time, Yeah.
So, that's what it takes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Before we say goodbye, do you have any last words of advice for someone who just wants to be funnier in life?
I think if you want to be funnier in life, take risks. I think that's the fastest route to finding humor is like, take the risk of just saying what's on your mind. Or if you have something you think might be funny, like don't keep that in, like say it out loud and you'll quickly figure out if people thought it was funny or not. And then just keep doing that and you'll and you'll become funnier through the process of learning. Like, okay, that didn't work. Like, maybe I don't say that one again, but try another one and say it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's good to start with low stakes audiences. You know what I mean? Like that are not going to matter at all if they don't think it's funny, you know?
Yeah, low stakes
So,
audiences, and like at least for stand up, a piece of advice that always works for me is like every show or performance, or in this case like speech, is just a rehearsal for like the next speech or the next time you
oh
need
my
to do it.
God, I say that all the time. I
Yeah.
say that don't freak out about this. This is just a rehearsal for the next one. That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Mhm.
great.
It
Oh,
helps so
good,
much.
good. So, Gary, how can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Gary from Connecticut, my website, GaryKSimons.com, YouTube, Gary Simons, or you can search Gary from Connecticut, Facebook, Gary Simons, TikTok, Gary from Connecticut, all those things you can find me on. I post very funny videos, either stand up or sketches, and that's where you can find shows if you want to see me live.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, Gary.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Well, thanks for listening to Gigi Presents. This has been Gigi Rosenberg in conversation with Gary Simons. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.